and a historical tour around the village of Nassau, put on by the interfaith group. All different kinds of worshiping God.
The mission statement of the Hudson Valley Berkshires Interfaith Network. We are and traditions working and serving together to model and support unity, inclusiveness, respect, justice, and peace through advocacy, education, and spiritually based leadership.
Thank you.
Good, very good. And after you say your name, count so we can know how many there are.
Oh, you mean one?
Okay, so we'll start with Diane. Instead of counting 1, 2, 3. Make it.
Yeah, come on, ride.
Okay, there's 15 of us.
So you're gonna start D. 1.
Oh, Sheila 2?
Yep. Say your name and your number.
Oh, we got
3.
3. See, this is.
Dave, label 4.
Rita 5. Joy 6.
I'll take along with Joel 8. I say 7 again.
I guess a 9.
Buzz, what's that game where you... Yeah. Sandy? 10, Sandy 10. I'm Caroline, 11.
I'm 12. Gina, Lola, Brigida.
I'm 13, Emily.
They're going to have to walk.
Pat's 13.
Put another
14.
Oh, 14, Pat.
That sounds funny when we say the number first. I like it.
Pat 14.
Oh my goodness, we got lots of room.
We've got to hug each other.
Terry, hey Dad, Terry.
Dad.
More.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, so are these the people she was waiting for?
Yeah.
He's not going to leave that up.
This is what you call butt to butt.
Are you on my email list?
No, what's about it?
You have to be loving each other for sure.
Okay. I sent an email, but I guess everybody got mixed up.
Well, somebody.
That's okay.
What's your name?
Phyllis
Phyllis, I mean your last name.
Erickson.
Are
Okay.
you on my email?
So 13, 14, 15.
No, she's 14.
She's 14, 15, 16.
Sometimes I get
Ian didn't say anything, did he? 17?
No, he didn't.
And is June coming? Yeah. June is here.
And I'm on.
She might be. She's about 18 plus, I think. Right? Can you count? Yes.
Okay.
You know what?
Well, Cliff said no. Well, he puts that tractor on this trail.
Here.
So I don't think we're going to go over that.
I got to prepare. You know what? We live in the old merchant
I don't think we're going to. But he just meant limit for the amount of people, maybe 16. We thought.
Right up Elm Street.
June, climb on.
He's not coming.
Right here. All right. Well, isn't this a fun thing, huh? I would have thought little old Nassau would be so interested.
Is that the end of the ride?
Did you like it? No, $5. All righty. So I'll try standing so you can hear me. So, as you know, we were supposed to do this yesterday and start at the Village Common. So we're kind of semi out of order, but that's just as well because it's very hard to take a ride around and decipher the different time periods because there's definitely different time periods in the village here. So if things get a little bit out of order, just say what year was that or about when was that if I forget to tell you. Anyway, so here we are in 1829. I'm going to pass these around. This is about the first map that we know of that has Nassau on it. However, once you look at it, you will see Nassau, the town, N-A-S-S-A-U, but still the name of the village as Union Village. Nassau actually has had 3 names in its history. And surprisingly, there is a Nassau, but I would say that's Brainerd. So, you know, you can't always believe what you're going to hear. So
Was it called Little Stores? Was it called New Stores?
We'll get into that. So, we know that Nassau has a Dutch name. And we know that there was Dutch settlers that came up the Hudson Valley, but there's no apparent connection other than somebody just said, gee, Nassau sounds like a good name, and there's Fort Nassau and Albany, and we'll name it after the Dutch royal family. And actually, last week I got a call from the library saying they had 2 visitors from the Netherlands who wanted to know how Nassau got its name. Could I talk to them? So I went down and I said, I'm sorry, there's just no connection. But
There's also
This
a
is the
Nassau
way.
in Germany that my girlfriend in Germany said that we have a connection.
there are 3
and
Nassau's
Nassau
in
in
Germany.
Mauritius too.
Yes, well, any place that had
Cape
Dutch
Town.
influence,
There's a
there's
Fort Nassau in
Nassau's.
Cape Town.
This is the original map of the Dutch patroonship. And I'll go a little bit more into that, but definitely this entire area was part of the Van Rensselaer Wick. They basically took the Hudson River and went 24 miles east and 24 miles west. So it was a huge tract of land. And I guess we would maybe be under the R where it says Rensselaer. So that's that. Alrighty. So we know that Native Americans were in this area for thousands of years before the arrival of the Europeans, and the tribe was the Mohegans, M-A-C, not Mohegans. We hear Mohegan. They were Mohegans. Mohegans were considered river Indians, and they were not Iroquois, they were Algonquin, and the Iroquois and the Algonquins were not friends.
We're under the R.
So from about this area to
That's how
the
it was
east
spelled
were
originally.
Algonquins, and the Iroquois were to the west. It's believed that the early trails that the Indians used, because basically they were hunters and gatherers to a large degree, trappers, was along the Valachikill. Now, if you're not familiar, if you continue right down Route 20, where it turns into Schodack, you go over that little bridge, that's the Valachikill Creek. And you can follow that creek from here down to Kinderhook Lake and eventually to Valatia, hence the name Valachikill, where it enters the Kinderhook Creek. And Kinderhook was an early settlement of the Dutch. They came, believe it or not, from Schodack Landing. Schodack Landing was more of a prosperous location than Schodack or Castleton. And some of those folks went inland to Kinderhook. If you've ever been down there and driven the back roads, you know that there's beautiful flat farm fields. It's just beautiful farming location. But the Dutch were not primarily here to farm. Unlike the English who wanted to settle people, the Dutch were here to trade. And beaver pelts were the big commodity. The rage in Europe for beaver skin, they actually bought it. It might not have been much, but at least they bought it, and they had signed documents saying that this land has been conveyed to so-and-so. So, however, the Dutch only lasted for 50 years. And then they cut a deal with the English, and the English took over New Netherlands with one minor exception. The English allowed the patroonship system to continue, and that would come back into Nassau history in centuries later. So the Dutch were here from 1609, when Henry Hudson came up the river, to about 1637, and at that point Kilian van Rensselaer, who was a diamond merchant in Amsterdam, sent his sons and his money interest to buy the property. He never came to the new colony. And where did they live? No, Port Crello. Port Crello remains in Rensselaer. It's a lovely place. If you're interested in that, it's a good thing. In 1704 is the first documentation that Europeans came up the Valachikill. And in this area somewhere was an Indian village, and my Mohegan is not too good, but I'll pronounce it phonetically, Otecocomac. Otecocomac was the name of the settlement, and that is believed to be in the vicinity of our Nassau Village today. In 1760 was actually the first time that lands were conveyed to white settlers, and the two men were something of scamps and speculators. Hugh Wilson and Joseph Frimmer, one an Irishman, one an Englishman, both had interest in Schodack Landing, but at that time it was move more and more and go into the wilderness and cultivate and dig and mine and do whatever you can to prosper. So they purchased basically everything in this area for very, very little. At that time, there were few transit routes. Route 20 obviously didn't exist. However, the common transit routes from here were south through, believe it or not, Malden Bridge, eventually to Kinderhook, because Kinderhook was the big settlement on this side of the river. And then from Kinderhook, east to Sheffield, Massachusetts. So that's how that linked. Even though there were people in northern Massachusetts at the time, they saw the Kinderhook Creek and Curtis Mountain, and maybe some of you know Curtis Mountain better than I do, as very bad obstacles to try to cross. Now, if you go out Route 20 today, you cross the Kinderhook 3 times to go in a straight line. So that was probably one of the reasons. And eventually, when they did get to, I won't say build a road, but have an area where horses and people could walk, it was in the vicinity of Tassawassa Lake. So if you go over North Nassau, Clark's Chapel, all of that area was founded before you got into the village. So it wasn't until about 1780s or so until the village started getting going. So I'm going to talk about Nassau in 3 different segments. First, the early years until about Revolutionary War or so. Then when most of these buildings were built, and then what I call the golden years, the 1890s, the turn of the century, and then after the war. Now, I do have a few pictures while we're here on Church Street. Some of you saw these. This is a picture of the Grace United Methodist Church before they put in the second floor. I don't know if all of you know that, but originally the building was built with just one floor. And the congregation had more people than could fit. And they explored a number of options, including building a chapel to the side, but they decided in 1933 that they would split the building and double their space. The Methodists date to 1820 here in the village, where they formed a meeting at a private residence on Albany Avenue, right, if we're going in this direction, on the left-hand side before the bridge. And then in 1820,
Can I see it?
Then they built this building.
Can I see it?
I somehow have either lost
Can
it.
I see it?
So this actually is now Nassau's oldest church building right here. While we're on Upper Church Street, originally there were 3 denominations in the village. From 1787, they shared a building on Chatham Street: the Dutch Reformed, the Lutherans, and the Presbyterians. I don't know what happened to the Lutherans. We know that the Presbyterians, for a bit, sort of worked with the Methodists, but that didn't work out. And we know the Reformed Church moved up here. But that building was moved from Chatham Street to Elm Street and is now a residence, a private residence. So parts of that building remain. In 1820, the Reformed Church built their first building here. That burned in 1899. Then they built their second building here around 1902, and many of us remember this building, which was just torn down.
This one was taken down. I remember that one. Yeah.
And that was considered the biggest church building in the village. And there was always a bit of competition, I think, between the Methodists and the Reformed as to who was the more prestigious, who had the bigger givers and all of that. However, because it was built in what they call auditorium style, it had a huge public space. And it was used for school graduations, it was used for plays, for musical entertainment, a sloping floor, pipe organ. So that is about 1900 when they built that building. And when Church Street was added to the National Register of Historic Places in the 1970s, that building was highlighted as one of the significant architectural features of the village. So it was a tremendous loss when that building was demolished.
Did they have to demolish it because it was...
Well, you're talking to the wrong person. No, they did not have to demolish it. It was such a prestigious building that in 1919, when the village celebrated their 100th anniversary, the theme of the anniversary was Welcome Back Veterans of World War I. And many of the ceremonies, including this photograph, were taken on the steps of the old church.
That is too bad.
Joyce,
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Did they raise this church?
No.
So they actually built the second floor.
they took the ceiling out.
Over, and then they put that wing on.
They put the wing on, and they had to have stairs. They didn't need stairs because there was no second floor, so they
Right.
built the stairs and enclosed
Wow,
that.
that's amazing.
Yeah, and the company that did it was a man and his nephew from Brainerd. Schillinger, and have you ever heard of Schillingers and Brainerd? They also built St. Mary's. So we're talking about Church Street here, and of course you got 3 churches, so that's a good name for it. But originally it was farming. And this is a picture of 69 Church Street, which is where Jeanette Scott lives, which is up the street here. The pictures from about 1900 show this entire area as farm fields. Wow. And, you know, kind of interesting. However, farther down the street, we have, this would be the Homestead Hotel, the former Homestead, the red brick building. And in the 1920s, that was a summer home of a stockbroker and his wife from New York, and that was considered they were the first people to have a chauffeured limousine in Nassau. Many of you know this building from Lower Church Street. Dr. Kraft lived there, the Victorian house. This house was the Whitbeck house. And Whitbeck was a very big name in Nassau for quite a few years. The story is that the man who built this came from Castleton and walked to Nassau every day and back, building the house.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember in the 50s that was for sale for $22,500.
It almost became a Chinese restaurant until they determined that they had to have a septic system and it wouldn't provide enough water for a Chinese restaurant. So, you know, it's not in the greatest shapes now, but at least it's not a Chinese restaurant. And then this is another architectural example. This is 15 Church Street, the former Reformed Church parsonage, now the Resource Center, but this is built in what they call Italianate style. So it has a flat roof, a cupola, and they're emulating the Tuscan villas of Italy. And as architectural styles change, so we do have a few nice examples of different architecture. All right, it's getting hot here in the sun.
Yeah, it just started back there in the shade.
I just happen to have some lemonade. It's $4 a glass. All right, we're ready. I guess we don't have to go to the Commons?
No.
All right, so we're going to go into St. Mary's parking lot. On a shady side.
You know, like the Kurt bringing synagogue come.
They're just about 100 years old.
Kurt, he didn't bring any water for himself.
And there was a ritual.
He did. Oh, he does have something?
I'm working on that story.
They settled in the town.
Oh, yeah.
And I worked there.
Terry.
I gotta tell you.
Those are great. Look at them. They feel important too. Look at them. Look at them walking.
Where? It was up in Sea Battery.
There's the Reformed Church as it is now the education building.
Young Marines just down to I
love the feeling of it.
You never heard of my son. Where you're from is up in the North Cattle. They both got shadows.
Yes, I know.
They sat there all night long.
Reminiscing. I can visualize that.
Which is a weird place to eat.
Well, you know, you stop to think about it. A lot of these guys, they would have been stuck here on the family farm or whatever.
It influenced my life. It influenced a lot of them.
Oh boy, shady character.
My father,
Okay. Well, he was a little too young.
No, he was a little younger than my dad.
All righty, we okay?
Yeah.
Nobody fell off. We'll wait for these two guys to get here.
Oh yeah.
They're our health addicts.
Those are the important people.
I know, they are.
They were the road
And they
guards.
both have red hats on. Look.
We could have borrowed a vest.
They actually walk alike.
They do.
Thanks for protecting us.
This is our escort division.
Like the red tail.
All right. All righty, so we've moved down Church Street, obviously, and we all know that this is St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church. The story of the Catholics in this community. Now, if you know history, you know that the development was primarily WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, right? The Reformed people, the Presbyterians, the Lutherans, the Methodists. It wasn't until the German immigration started that Catholics started coming to this area, and originally this church celebrated Mass in the German language.
Wow.
But within a few years, it was considered that wouldn't help our kids because they saw that the tide was changing. So they eventually changed to English, but there was a little bit of resentment. The parish was founded in 1852. So if you know European history, wars raging through Central Europe, very poor conditions, and immigration just started in huge numbers. And in another 20 years, there were 1 million Germans a year emigrating to the United States. Wow. That's how my grandparents got here. So anyway, 1852, there were enough Catholics to form a parish. And excuse me if I use the wrong words. The bishop in Albany granted the right to have a parish, and they called upon the Franciscans. And the Franciscans were the spiritual leaders of the parish just until 2 years ago. It's a long tradition. So when I heard that, I'm not even a Catholic, but I just said, "Oh, that's too bad." You know, they have been here for so many years. And originally, like most of the other churches, they met in a private home. Some of us know it as Alice and Artie's or the Grand Hotel, but the building next to Stewart's.
I remember that.
They met in there only for 2 more years, and then in 1853 they purchased a building next to the library. It's now gone. Was a private residence, and converted that into a church. So they were there for many, many years. 1926, they decided we really need our own church building. These were farms along here primarily, farms in the back. They purchased 2 houses here, built the church, again the same construction company from Brainerd or local builders.
That did
built
the Methodist.
That built the Methodist.
Second
that
floor.
converted
Second
the
floor.
Methodist
Second,
church.
yeah.
Built this, and there's a lot of interesting things in there. I won't go into it at the moment, but ever since St. Mary's has been here, the church building was then used as a education building until they built this building, and then that building was purchased by the library, and when the library expanded, that's where that went.
Which one? The library.
Where the library driveway is.
That used to be tell me again. That was part of the
There was
church?
a building next to the library.
next to the library.
That was approximately where their driveway is.
Okay.
That was the original St. Mary's Church, and then when they built this
Okay.
church, it became their church hall.
Got it.
Or bingo den, depending upon. I can remember as a little kid, my dad was always the band leader here, and every once in a while we would need a place to rehearse, and we were able to go in there. And I didn't play any instruments at that time, so I just sort of roamed around. And they had a little small balcony, and 2 things I remember in that balcony: cases of Blendwell beverage sodas, which was a company down in Brookview that made soda, and the bingo paraphernalia, which I had never seen in my life before. I was always as a little kid, amazed at that. So we're going to skip ahead because we're here. So St. Mary's did okay. But it wasn't until after World War II that they really started to flourish and grow into the largest congregation in the village because of these houses. Now, this is one of 3 developments, all built by the same company after the war, sold as places for returning veterans and their families to live. Left Albany, left Rensselaer, left Troy, wherever, and moved here. And for whatever reason, a larger proportion of those folks were Catholic than other folks. So the Catholic Church prospered. This area was called by the residents, before they built it, the Vlaai, V-L-Y. And Vlaai is a Dutch word meaning swamp, basically. And this was considered, in the wintertime, the place where kids and adults would go ice skating because it flooded and it was swampy and it was wet. Perfect place to build houses, right? So luckily these are all slab houses. There's no cellar. But within the first year, things flooded, and where did the water had to go somewhere? So it went into the backyards of Elm Street. So there was quite the to do with the 2 areas because they blamed these houses for the flooding on Elm Street. And originally this was called Edgewood Acres. They all had, some of the names have stayed. Orchard Park was always Orchard Park. Westbrook was always Westbrook.
Yeah.
But this was Edgewood Acres.
Isn't that what they used to call the
house right
The
here?
first house here belonged to a family, the Roth family, and Mrs. Roth, Ruth Turk Roth, was a character in her own way. She was very artistic. She was very much into community musical productions. She wrote columns for the Times Union, the Knickerbocker News, and then finally the Chatham Courier. And this house is where she lived, and she had a sign there that said Edgewood Acres on it. And that sign stayed there for many, many, many years. It was also a vivid shade of fuchsia, red.
Matched her clothing.
Yeah.
Dressed in red in her living room was all
She
red.
had a huge Raggedy Ann and Andy doll.
Grown sons of
And she gave piano lessons, so lots of little kids went in the house were absolutely terrorized by the whole experience. But anyway, this is one of the develops, and they built 2 houses in the last few years down there, so there's still room. When we go back out on the street, you all know where the library is, correct? That, of course, isn't the original location of the library. The library dates back to 1881, where they met upstairs over a meat market closer to the village square. I can imagine they probably had a little bit of a discussion about that. In 1893, they purchased the front building, the small building, which was the consistory hall of the Reformed Church. Now, in the Reformed denomination, the consistory is the deacons, the elders, the organizational group of the church. So that was their little hall for their meetings. The library purchased that, and one of Nassau's prominent citizens, I was just talking to Pat about this yesterday, bequested 600 books to start the collection. And we're going to look and see if any of those books are still there. They probably haven't been taken out in a while, but
They're in the basement.
somewhere if they date back. And the original collection was 600 books with a circulation of 1,650. So I guess that's how many times in a year they let out. So, however, a lot of older people today fondly remember the library being open on Saturday nights, because Saturday nights was the big night in Nassau, and there would be a band concert in the village square, which we'll get to, and the library said, well, there's people here, we'll open the library, and whether it gave proper young ladies an excuse to get out of the house and go to the library, and they're really going to the soda shop, I don't know.
radio,
got
but
a
no
question.
TV.
Yeah, you know, it's so, this is St. Mary's Church, right?
Yes.
I was born and brought up in Marlborough, Mass., and I was baptized in St. Mary's Church.
Yes, that's a popular
And
name.
we had a school a little bit set back, and it was St. Anthony's School, and it went from kindergarten to 8th grade. And I used to walk from there to my house 1.5 miles every day, back and forth. Yeah, so
And that's why you're a sprightly dancer today. Yesterday at the party,
That's the key.
he led the conga line.
no, we had in Marlborough, Mass. There was a lake where all the water came from, and it was I forget the name of the lake right now, but near the lake, up on the hill, there was a big building, and all the great bands used to play
yeah,
there.
the big bands.
And I remember just a few of them because I wasn't only born in 1927, and Marlborough was founded in 1660 and then became a town in 18-something. So, you know, it brings me home. I haven't been in there, but I've got to visit that church.
Yeah. Well, let's hear more about Nassau. not
And
Marlborough.
Elm Street, Speedy.
But I'm happy where I am.
Okay.
That's good.
You guys
We're happy to have you.
yeah.
You big beautiful.
Oh, God.
Really,
Is there a shortcut through here through the
she's a very good friend of my mother.
Done
When I
a
met her
nice
for the first
job.
time, I was
She wrote poems.
Did you take piano lessons
But
from
both of
her?
her sons were brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Both of them did. I think they both went to
When we have a
and they used to go on that
viewing,
show.
we're going to do a little hayride.
Reverend Antone.
You know there was a second full moon in June.
Yes, no, it's a lot.
I think they might have been my brothers and
Actually, the library.
No, they only these were the only 2 kids that had like legal satchels. They carried all.
And that's Nassau Town Hall right here. This is a town hall, not a village hall.
That's how they got on those shows.
That's where I go to court every Wednesday night. July, the fireplace was done by John.
I didn't realize that.
It's up and down. There's a beautiful pine tree there. Looks there. But we have a new porch.
This is so fun. This is the first time I got to ride this.
The library was there.
This is a Nassau Reformed Church.
Yeah, that's the resource. I would just that in his history with these arches. Yeah, I can imagine.
There's a house that the guy who does many appraisals in this area, I can't remember his name, owns
Route 20. It goes from Boston Folks all the way to Oregon. Here's new stores. New stores.
There, it's gorgeous.
That's new stores. Jonathan Hogan, 1784. This is also,
I'm talking about the
and this is Jonathan Hogan's house.
for all the real estate in this area. He has an Italianate two-story mansion down in Skodak Lane, down near the river. We went there to pick up our
This
appraisal.
is the
And it's
parsonage.
he and his wife showed me around. Beautiful inside too. And
No,
it's
this is
way
the
out. I mean, the drive there. I don't know.
Number 18.
I know Lisa Minnelli
This is the parsonage of the Methodist Church. This is Randy and Melody Howard. And their 3 dogs.
Minnelli owned the place.
How come we didn't stop and have a
Dr.
drink?
Skip's old place.
This is Sandy McConnell.
She sold that.
That's Sandy's house. You know that? Beautiful. Did you know that? And this one is Mosserine, which used to be the Presbyterian Church. Here's the Presbyterian Church. Presbyterian Church.
July, and then I'll.
Oh, it does say former Presbyterian. This is owned by Debbie.
So we had
This is Debbie Roma, and they own the bag company in Albany.
My dentist
They own the bag company, Clearview Bag.
This is Cooper's house.
This is the Decker. This is the
He has their office there on the other side of 20, but he used to have
This is Phelps. That's Phelps.
historic register. You see the eyebrow windows?
This is where the so-called animal control
I don't know if it's those or the ones that occurred. I'm not
This is
sure.
Kelly and Dave.
Yeah, I think so.
This is Guy Forte and Susan Forte and Judy Zeller. And Judy.
My daughter
Judy Zeller.
lives there. Tried to renovate
This
it.
is
Yeah, they just sold it.
Lori's house, and the dog that lives there is named Pudgy, and there's another dog lives there. Yeah, what is his name? Harvey.
My house is right up there on the left. Up where do you live?
Right here.
On the left. It's yeah, it was
No, 45. Can you see 45?
yeah, it was a merchant house.
This man drives a taxi cab in Albany all night long. This is where Maureen Sellery lives and Frank Sellery. And this is Maida. This is Maida.
Register the deed. They keep chasing
glad
my
Maureen
daughter
finally
for
put siding on that
taxes.
house.
She says, I sold it. I can show you. He won't register the deed.
This is the old, he's going to tell you about it.
This cider.
All right.
Oh, this Steve Nally passed away. I didn't know he owned it. Yes, but his son.
Alrighty,
Is his
we're
son
going to be
Steve?
brief because we have to make our own
think it's Steve.
breezer. Oh, there's a lovely breeze, isn't there?
Yeah.
So this is
Lovely.
the former Nassau Mill. Everybody seems to call it Speedy Sales because there's a sign on
there's a
there. But this is
mill,
actually the original grist mill that Jonathan Hogue, when we talk about Hogue's Corner,
Oh, yeah.
blah, blah, blah,
Nassau
that he
Mills.
built. We believe it's from 1789, the original core of that building.
Wow.
And this is another
Nassau
chain.
Mills.
Yeah.
This was sort of at the height of the mill in the early mid 1800s Civil War period. There was lots of grain grown around this part of Rensselaer County, and it sort of rivaled the whole of Rensselaer County is the most grain. This is a picture from the 1950s when a grocery store was in there and a shop store. So it has been many, many, many things. Right in here, yeah. And
that's why the glass.
the whole reason is when he negotiated the property from the Indians, he knew that there was water up here in Nassau Lake. Of course, it wasn't a lake at that time, but there was running water. And he had the technology to dam the lake, to create a race to trap that water. And the big thing is, how big is the drop from the level of the water to the mill wheel? 23 feet, which you say today is 23 feet elevation change, but that's what they said. So there were all mills along here, including a cider mill, a sawmill on both sides of the road, and from time to time in the spring, a lot of flooding. Everything that wasn't too well anchored would wash out, and then sometimes they would start ahead.
But Kurt, he didn't do it from the Indians, he did it from Stephen Rensselaer.
Well, next year you can give this to her. No, Stephen Rensselaer was the patroon, but it was all tied in together. He ultimately held a lot of the rights, but Hogue was smart. He knew when he could exercise maneuver changes in the lease. Because there were times when the Van Rensselaers were up and there were times when they were down. And when Hogue was still here, he was able to negotiate changes to give him lease. Because typically the patroon owned all water rights, all mineral rights.
On the other side.
And then you grew your crops and had to give a portion of that to him every year, the feudal system.
What was Hogue? What nationality was he?
Hogue was English.
He's English.
He was a Quaker from Dutchess County.
Oh, wow.
Hogue was a Quaker territory.
That's the Presbyterian church that we passed. So let's see, 1793 dam, the Beaver Dam creating Nassau Lake. Wheat, barley, rye, cider mill was farther down. Speedy sales.
That's just been torn down.
Elm Street has sort of an interesting history. We always think of it as Elm Street, but prior to that it was called Mill Street because the mills were down here. And then prior to that it was called Wall Street. I don't know why it was called Wall Street. We know why the name changed from Mill Street to Elm Street, and I'll give you a piece of paper before we leave if you want to look that up. But some of the famous places on Elm Street, and we have a descendant right here of the Winters Pork Factory Empire. Joel is a grandson.
Yeah, I'm grandson
of the Winters family, and they were pork producers. The first telephone exchange was in a building, a house on Elm Street. The bank, we see the bank long before that. There were other things there. The first veterinary was there. Surprisingly enough, there's always been an undertaker. The undertaker's parlors have always been on Elm Street. And of course, the Methodist parsonage. There was a creamery there at the time of the railroad. And number 31, which will be on our right side, a White House that sits back just a little bit. That is the house of one of the original developers, settlers, Moses Vale. Very, very old house at 31. So I'm glad somebody bought
1787.
that. And Glendora remembers when they built that, 1787. Thank you very much.
Do you know who owns this?
How about,
Terry, you and Andrew want to get
That was sold.
Terry,
That was sold at auction.
you want to walk this
A year and a
make
half
room
ago
for everybody?
for $700.
You want to?
Somebody needs to tear it down.
And then they found out they had $27,000 back taxes. And so whoever bought it gave up doing anything with it. And I think
I got hit by the
Just
train.
tear it down.
you're going to
Big accident.
The old millstone's probably buried in there.
And it was like out of town.
Somebody wants to do that. That would be very valuable.
you want
The
to
millstone.
you want to see where Glendora lives?
when we go by, I'll tell
Would
you.
you like to see where Glendora lives?
Yeah, we'd like to see where Glendora is.
Okay.
Merchants Crossing when the trolley came. I was wondering if there were wires in it.
Chris and Tammy lives there. That's the end of Nassau Village.
Yeah.
And I didn't know much.
There's the Valatia Kill.
Yeah.
And Tammy lives here.
Yes, I know. I picked Chris with Richard and Pat when we picked you up.
And
Down there.
Melissa lives here.
Yeah.
And Glennie lives here.
He lives down there, that blue.
Hi.com. Hi.com.
Okay, the Methodists reformed, the Catholics, and the Jews. And I had no idea. When I got out, I was so surprised.
This is where we had the big party last night.
Hey!
Happy 5th.
This says Sue works for the. This is where the mayor lives. Everybody, here's where the mayor lives. Hi, Valentes. This is the advertiser. Sue from the advertiser. This is Anthony Harrington. This is where our librarian lives. Tracy Clegg. Tracy Clegg, librarian.
Yeah, the red one?
Yep. This is where. This is the Mosesville house right here.
And then she tried
1787.
Wow, that's the house right there.
1787. Mosesville.
1787. Wow.
This is where Judge Cooper lives.
Yeah, I knew that.
The lawyer. And this is the cost probes.
Yeah.
So she wasn't grandfathered, and they made.
Oh, now who is it? Oh, this. Who is this?
In the whole back of it, which made her say, and they would, she could not get approval.
This is the Presbyterian pastor lived there. Here's where Maxine lives. Maxine lives here. Maxine lives here. This house is abandoned. This great big house is abandoned. This great big house is abandoned.
The electricity, everything.
This is McCaffrey. If I'm not paying, you know the McCaffreys?
Yeah.
This is the Mooney's house.
Yeah.
I mean, they
No, it isn't. That's not the Mooney's house. This is the Mooney's house. Oh, right.
Amazing. This is where the funeral call, I mean, when I was a kid. Cappy LeClaire. Remember Cappy LeClaire?
This house is owned by the Reformed Church of Skodak Landing. That one right there. Kurt, did you know that?
What?
That house is owned by the Reformed Church of Skodak Landing.
This one?
Yes, of all things.
And that's Susan Keegan right there.
And this is where Gordon Smith lived.
This was a bank.
And what's going to happen to this mess?
Oh, yeah.
And there's the tree we saved.
The city bank.
Oh, that's cool.
Whole company. Ran all the way over.
Yeah. I want to make this into a park or a parking lot.
Yeah, they were real sure.
Now you on this mobile station, you know what happens?
Oh, this is.
How's this for using a
Get the megaphone.
light on our community here? They just stopped for the light.
Yeah, right.
So this is going to be talking about the village square, which
I remember.
1/4 of
be on that
it
side.
is intact, but that's about it. So when the early settlers came, they found right about where the pine tree is, the famous pine tree, a spring of clear, fresh water. Wow. And of course you can't live without water, so that was one of the original reasons why this little Four Corners was settled. So we've got the road going south to Malden Bridge and eventually Kinderhook. We've got the road going east to Pittsfield. We've got the road going north to Burden Lake and Nassau Lake. From about the 1830s, 1840s, farm agriculture greatly grew in this area. Whoops.
That's okay.
I knew when I put these in these things, they'd slide out. Shortly after the Revolution, one of the major industries was raising horses in this area. And the horses generally were exported to the West Indies, if you can imagine that. And they would get between $25 and $50 a horse at that time in the early 1800s. So that was a lot of money. As the village developed, the Hogue family was very instrumental. He eventually died after serving in the New York State Assembly, Jonathan Hogue, but he had a large family. The red brick building, the Homestead Hotel, that was a Hogue house. Down on Elm Street there was Hogue houses, and there was a Hogue cemetery, which we're still not exactly clear where that went to, but on the backside of Elm Street. So the Hogues had a long run in Nassau, and there still are descendants. I've actually emailed one of them. So there's more Hogue story to go. So this is one of the earliest pictures. This is about 1870.
Oh, yeah.
And like if you're standing right in the middle of the street looking up Church Street, the thing that I am always amazed at are the trees.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just all the beautiful trees. So here we have the exact same building, the antique store, and the exact same building next to it, sometimes called the General Wool House, and then other houses going up. And when you pass it around, you'll see right in the middle a very New England looking white church right at the bend in the road. That was the original Reformed church. So I'll pass that around. You can take a look at it.
Just started on that.
Okay.
Go around like it had.
Oh, yeah.
And as the village progressed,
Burned down.
this was sort of the commercial center. Now, as I was starting to say, farms were being built at a great rate on the outer limits of Nassau. At one time, there were 16 separate schoolhouses in the town of Nassau. Now, in order to build a schoolhouse, there had to be a nucleus of kids. So prior to the incorporation, there were 16 separate places within 5 miles of here where there were settlements. So all of those people generally were customers of the businesses in the village. And there were a lot of villages. There were 3 or 4 general stores at the same time, plus hotels, boarding houses, restaurants, boot shops, wagon shops, all the necessities. Because remember, this is before the trolley cars, before cars, and basically as far as you could go on a horse in a day, and it wasn't very far. So Nassau grew out of that popularity, and eventually the village square looked like this. Now, some of the photographs are from postcards that were sold when there used to be the pharmacy right on that corner. And each of the 3 succeeding generations of pharmacists had postcards made. Some have funny captions. This says Poverty Row, Nassau, New York. I'm not too happy about that one. But that 3 buildings right in the line before they built the Masonic Temple would go all the way down Chatham Street. And where we are sitting here now was the site of either the Nassau House, Bateman's Hotel, or the last name Kelly's Hotel. And that hotel was here from about the early 1800s, sat right here, beautiful big wooden building, of course. And the local legends are that Martin Van Buren would have dinner here. You know, of course, they'd have political meetings and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that was a beauty.
The big wigs of the day, General Lafayette, Napoleon's brother-in-law, came through a visit of the United States and planted a elm tree, and allegedly on that corner across the street, and if you ever see the village seal, there's a tree on it, and that is the Lafayette elm that was planted in Nassau. So things proceeded pretty well. They built a bandstand on that corner, sort of a Victorian period bandstand, and in the 20s and 30s they would have band concerts. And those of you who know me know I'm always interested in bands. There's been a community band, a brass band, I guess you could say, since about the end of the Civil War. And this is one of the early pictures. This was taken on the steps of the building that would have been right across the street, the Nassau Cornet Band, which was a common name for bands, even though it wasn't all cornets, that's what they called them. And this is from the late 50s, early 60s, coming down Chatham Street, Memorial Day Parade. Burr Rao, some of you may remember.
What year is that?
Late 1950s, early 60s.
I
Did you march in that parade?
I marched in all, I was a fire girl.
Fire girl. Thank you for your service.
Oh, no wonder you're so high.
No, the fires. I forget, the children of the, whatever.
I'll give you a little incidental story.
I marched in all of them.
This skinny guy in the corner with the valve trombone, that's my dad. And he was brought up in Albany, and my mom was brought up in Clinton Heights, but she always loved old houses. And when they got to the point where they wanted to buy a house, they looked all around for old houses. They came to Nassau, were stopped by a policeman, which is not uncommon. And I think it was just out of curiosity that there was a stranger in town. And the policeman said to my dad, how you doing? What are you doing? And the guy said, my dad said, oh, we're here looking for a house. Oh. And the policeman, and this is, I have to say, from my father to my lips, the policeman said to him, do you play a musical instrument? No kidding. And of course, this was music to my father's ears. He says, yeah. He says, well, I'm the village band leader. This is my house.
Oh, that's so funny.
So I live 51 Church Street, a little bit up from the other side of the Methodist Church. And then the second thing that happened is my brother and I were just little. I wasn't even born, actually. You get much littler than that. And it was a decision what church to go to. And my mother looked around, saw Route 20, and said, "We're not crossing the street, we're going to the Reformed Church." Those are my Nassau stories. Kelly's Hotel remained here until the 1950s, when it was torn down to build the predecessor of this gas station, which is too bad because of... However, I have seen pictures of the inside, the bar room, and it was like, you know, there's a spittoon on the floor. It didn't look like a casual dining
Class operation.
Wow, that's nice.
There's the bandstand. This is also the bandstand in 1919.
The old mobile
They
station.
had a plaque with all of the names of the servicemen, and I believe they were all men, in World War I, and they put that up on the village bandstand. This is allegedly, it's not too good a picture, the first automobile in Nassau. And this is 4 wheels, horseless carriage, and 1905, 1907, somewhere there. I'm not good on dating cars. This is another picture of the bandstand on 4th of July, 1919.
They really do. Oh, the bandstand was where? 4th of July. Yeah.
Here's the drugstore.
And that, yeah.
And then the drugstore became the IGA. Some of you may remember the IGA. So all the same building.
What about Delson?
That's where the...
In 1942, on Memorial Day in 1942, the residents of the town decided to erect a monument to people serving in World War II. And this was, again, on that village square. It was made of wood. One of the local carpenters.
I remember
Well, it was made of wood. It rains, it snows, it gets wet, and eventually by the mid-1950s or so, it hadn't been maintained, it hadn't been repainted, it hadn't been anything. And they said, that's it. And more people have asked me where it went.
I was wondering myself.
And just to show you that Nassau was in the loop of things, we had a movie theater. Well, actually, it was the Masonic Temple here. And this is 1940, and you could go to the movies for 25 cents. Right here in Nassau. There was a bowling alley in there. Prior to that, there was a music hall on Elm Street. So we had...
Big city.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the tree?
No. That's not the tree. So let's see. I'm going to go back in time. The original name, New Stores. Then it became Phillipstown in honor of Philip Van Rensselaer. And then shortly after that, it became Union Village. And at that time, Hogue was serving in the New York State Assembly, and they think that Hogue had an influence to change the name of the village because you had to have a legislative action. In 1798, there were about 30 houses here. In, let's see here, in 1806, the town of Nassau was founded. Prior to that, it had been Skodak. In 1806, the boundaries were set that we have today for the town. And then in 1808, the village changed the name to Nassau. Again, in that year, 1808, there was an application by the Hogues to build a turnpike from here to the Massachusetts border. That's the forerunner of Route 20. Turnpikes, of course, you had to pay to go on them. And it was an investment company that had partners that footed the money to build it, and then they would hopefully reap the profits. There's always a story about the red brick building and the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. Unfortunately, that has never been totally proven or totally disproven. So, to the house next to the blue building here across the street. In 1819, when the village was incorporated, the population of just the village was 300. And in 1910, already traffic was getting so congested that the village board appealed for some sort of traffic control. So they bought what they called a silent policeman. And it was a metal tin, and on one side it had a stop sign, and on the other side it had a caution sign. And that's what they put out here.
Wow.
I'm sure somebody ran over it, but I don't know when. And then in 1913, the road was paved for the first time. It still wasn't called Route 20. From here east, it was called the Pittsfield Road, and from here west, it was called the Albany Road, generally speaking. But at that time, addresses, there were no house numbers. Those didn't come in until after the war. So for those of us trying to look at deeds to see who owned what when, very difficult. All right. Can you find shade in the Village Commons? Down the bottom?
It's so nice with all the people wanting to walk on it. This is the most interesting hardware store. It is a mess inside. But you go in there and Daniel Smith, is this your cousin?
You can find anything.
Sheila, is that your cousin?
That's my cousin.
You're related to the Smiths?
Danny's your cousin? Yeah.
On your mom's side?
On which side are you related? This is the Tom's Restaurant that just changed its name to Hollywood. And if you go straight over that way, you go to my house in the Valatia Kill. This is John Street. Who lived there? Kurt.
This is a nice house.
Kurt. Kurt, who lived there? Who lived there, dear?
That's funny. I went to the school. He's great. He's still, ever since Delson's burned down. I remember
He's wondering about that.
This is Judge Cooper's office. This is Donald P. Sutherland School.
twice a day.
But Lord, that whole house was moved here from East Kodak.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really? What, dear? The Cooper. Yeah, you didn't see me point out their house?
No, which number is that?
Yeah, it was next to the Moses Vale house. It was on the east side of the Moses Vale house. This is Judge Cooper's office. Right here. And Judge Cooper is beginning to tell jokes. Every night after court is over, I tell him a joke. And after 6 weeks, he started telling me jokes. Pretty nice. This is beautiful furniture.
That's really, yeah.
This is John Street going to Skodak. That's Bullis Street. Where's Bullis Street? Oh, over there. Bullis Street is over there.
This is where we were going to have our...
Well, we had a good time just the same.
I don't know where Margaret's daughter lives.
You used to be in the piano playing.
I remember riding
This is the Fourth Church in Nassau, and that's the
1940.
They still had trolleys. I traveled. I went to what's the trade school?
Oh, did you?
And I lived in Marlboro. There was a bus.
We always call that the piano player.
And they called it BMW, Boston.
What's the name of that church?
I had to walk up the end of my street and pick up a bus that came from the other town.
I used to go to.
We went to
Yeah, New Hope for Life. Thank you. New Hope for Life. That would be David.
and we'd hop.
I don't know about anybody else, but I got to stand for him.
How about a nice hand for our driver? Give that man a tip. Well, we're kind of running late, and I didn't know how long
That's
this would
okay.
take
We're
because
having
I've
a
never
good
done
time.
it before. So we're cutting out a
It
little.
looks like you've done it along.
Yeah, well, it's the other
Like you're a
side of-
pro.
it's the Irish side of the family, I think.
Oh.
So let's see here. We just came down Albany Avenue and we turned onto John Street. For any of you who are interested, these are the original blueprints from the paving. And of course, one of the well, no, I won't talk about that. If you go down Albany Avenue a little bit farther, I think this is 21. This is a Greek revival house. See the columns on there? After the Revolution, they got the idea that, we're a new republic. We're going to model ourselves after the ancient Romans and the Greeks. And this style of architecture started pretty much in New England and worked its way across New York State and is very big in New York State. But this is a beautiful old house that is not in the greatest repair. We went past Mrs. Belcher's rooming house, and one of the local jokes was you go to Mrs. Belcher's and you're going to belch after dinner. This is across from Stewart's now where the computer repair place is there. Right next to the right-of-way. Yeah. Farther, we didn't go far enough down on Albany Avenue, but there was an academy there in several different versions. Originally, the two buildings were together, and at some point they separated the buildings.
That's where the Presbyterian Church was, wasn't it? That they moved over to Elm Street.
No, Presbyterian Church was on Chatham Street.
The one they moved.
Yep. Hey, you
Oh,
stealing?
no,
I'm
it isn't.
sorry.
No, it isn't.
I thought you set it aside.
No, I'm trying to go in some sort of chronological order.
all right.
The second house from the corner, this big white house, was John Van
I
Valkenburg's
remember.
house.
I mean, that's a
And
nice
he owned
house.
all of this property.
Oh.
And originally this was farmland.
Wow.
And I shouldn't have said John. One of the Van Valkenburgs. Eventually, a John Van Valkenburg owned this and got the brilliant idea of building a new street, which he named promptly after himself.
John
And then this house became the Lind House. I don't know if any of you remember Dorothy Lind.
Yes, I do.
But the Linds were two brothers who were pharmacists. And one brother lived in this house, and the other brother lived right on the corner here. That house was originally built in East Skodak, cut, and moved to Nassau.
Really?
Around the turn of the century. Wow. So,
Where's the old railroad line?
we're going to get to that, June. That's a whole other subject.
Yeah.
And then this is the bridge over the Valachikill. When this house was new,
Yeah, you know that. Is that where the
that's
antiques?
in my day and age. This was Care's house, where Care lived. Care lived. I don't remember the name of the people who live there now, but it's the very last house before you get to the bridge on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And the story was that when people first started getting cars in Nassau, they would take their cars, and you can't see it in this picture, but there was space on one side of the bridge, and they would drive the cars down in the creek, and they pay kids to wash them. So that was a big thing. So,
Good concept.
all right, we're gonna go backwards.
First car wash.
Go backwards a
Dirty
little
creek
bit here, and we're gonna talk about.
That'd
Can't see it, but the yellow building that is now Bailey's Antiques. That has quite a history. That was
Valachikill.
built as a
Route 20.
soda factory, soda water factory.
It goes to Skoda.
And the Rochert
This
family,
is Nassau.
who for a time were big in Nassau. 4 or 5 brothers, very involved with the fire department, very involved with local politics, had a bottling works and the local distributor of Dobler beer. I tend to think, since they went out of business when Prohibition was enacted, that perhaps the Dobler beer portion of their sales was the significant portion. So after they went out, Peabody leased the building and hired local women to do piecemeal sewing, corsets and girdles and arrow collars and all of that. After that went out of fashion, the fire department bought the building, and that was the Fireman's Hall. And if you've ever been upstairs in that building, you see a stage, and there's still a stage there. And that's where they had local minstrel shows. I have all the names of the people who are in blackface, so if I ever need a little bit of ammunition. All righty, now we're going to talk about, we're getting into the golden age here. So this place where we are sitting at this point, this was the Rensselaer County Fairgrounds.
Oh my goodness.
Long before Scotticoke. The Nassau Fair was called the Nassau Fair, but indeed it was the Rensselaer County Fair. And I'll give you the years here, as soon as I find it. Wait a minute. You know, we're out of order here, so.
Yeah, we were going to start here.
Well, from about the 1840s. From about the 1840s to 1943, the Nassau Fair took place right here. And this was sort of like the thing in Nassau. This put Nassau on the map. Shortly after the fair started, speculators determined that there was enough people living out here and enough businesses to build a railway line. And where these power lines here, that is the track bed of 3 successive railroads, best known as the Albany Southern. That was the last one. But starting in the 1898, there was a line coming from East Greenbush, coming from Rensselaer to East Greenbush, and there was a line coming up from Hudson to Kinderhook Lake. And this company bridged the two so that you could go straight from Hudson to Albany.
Wow.
And at Kinderhook Lake built an amusement park called Electric Park. The railroad was not a steam railroad, not a diesel railroad, it was an electric railroad. And the way in which they provided the electricity to the trolley cars was through what's called a third rail. If you've ever heard that phrase, don't step on the third rail, that's where that came from. Now, I'm not an electrician, so I don't know if it was AC or DC, but if you stepped on that rail and that current stopped in your body, you were dead. There were numerous accidents, deadly to dogs, cows. It was just not a system that obviously we don't have them today, too many places. That's why they put the electricity lines above nowadays. But it was always a third rail line. And that started in the late 1890s and went until 1929. With that railroad, the increase in population and business and activities just skyrocketed. That just opened up this whole community to easy access because it was half an hour, same as it is today, to get to Albany. The original price was 5 cents to get to Albany.
Oh, wow.
One of the things that I found very interesting and surprising is that when the fair was only a seasonal fair, as they are now, it ran 4 days during the week. It did not go on the weekends.
Really?
So it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in most years. Yeah, I guess. I guess that might have had something to do with it. But they used the property for other things throughout the year, field days, and the baseball team would play here and other things. But all of this, and where the senior citizens apartments are over there, was all part of the fairgrounds. That was the racetrack, and horse racing was very, very big. The horse racing kind of gave out. Then in the 30s, they brought in dog racing. Well, let me back up to the horse. And it was a big thing. It was a double line, so you could have trains passing each other.
Yeah, that's for Stewart's, isn't it?
That's where Stewart's was.
For Stewart's.
This is an ad for Nassau Fair in 1915. And as you can see, horse racing was one of the things. And one of the attractions is what they call a floral parade. And today there is still such a thing in existence in Pasadena, California. It's called the Rose Parade.
The Rose Parade.
It goes back to ancient times. And the local people would enter, and they had prizes, and pretty considerable prizes. So that's a couple who lived over on Chatham Street. He was also a photographer, and many of the photographs that we have, he took. So that the Nassau Fair, another trolley thing.
Butterfly on the front of
And
his bike?
here's the grandstand, and one of the buildings. You know, they had buildings for different displays. And now there's talk that they want to try to convert this the train track into a rail trail where you can
That would
walk
be
it.
nice. And bicycle.
Whether they do it or not, I don't know. But they just opened one in Stephentown.
Oh, yeah. Just behind me.
Here's an ad for the dog racing, and somewhere in here, the thing that always got me, you know how they call horse racing the sport of kings? They call this the sport of queens.
That was Dave's farmer's market.
Yep. That's where you can buy bottle rockets. So,
Kurt, didn't the Waters live on this street who started the pharmacy? The Waters family?
what about they live in a couple different places. There were several generations. And then I can't stop without saying the economy store. Many of you remember Delson's economy store, which was right where the trolley stop is now.
The night it burned down.
Across from Stewart's, that was there? Wow.
Then we know we've got the
There was one here.
piano factory across the street. Originally the piano factory was started on Bunker Hill, and it burned. A lot of fires around here. And in 1905, this was built by the Cozy Garden brothers, the three brothers. And that remained in business until 1929.
That's where your father had his printing shop.
Among other
Right there?
That's the inside of the train station.
This is amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's a car dealer.
And they came on the train.
Pictures. That the
Pretty much the same.
Yeah, it was a big,
Yes.
I think it was this is the piano place right behind us.
Ding, 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 here comes the
And
trolley.
the siren that controlled the shifts was
I thought
actually
my
like
dad
part
rolled
of
this down here at the Boy Scout camp.
because
was
there was
down
never
Camp
municipal
Foley,
water in
down
the
here.
village until
Down here in Kinderhook Lake.
19.
I thought he rolled that.
Sheila, whose supermarket was that? Was that Paxson? Was that?
Delson owned it, but Paxson ran it.
They were the managers of it. And they lived above.
There's lots more information that could be shared.
And that wasn't Maxine's.
If you're so inclined, here's
Down where
there are some places, some websites.
Wait, I can't hear.
You've been a lovely, if not boisterous, audience. But if you're so inclined, here is some more information on websites for Nassau history, books in the library that relate to Nassau history, and I'll just get those going. We got 4 events kind of coming up, and I didn't realize it till I looked at the dates. A lot of them are October, but on Sunday, August 9th, right here, we're going to invite old and new residents to come and just sit down and reminisce. Just sit down and talk. If you've got questions about Nassau, you can come and ask your questions. If you've got a funny story or your family came here. And if you don't have any of that, but you live here, we're also going to have maps of all the streets with all the houses. And if you know you lived there in 1964, you're going to write that. And if you know somebody else who lived there, you're going to write that. Because one of the hardest problems, somebody says to me, my family lived here. When? I don't know. So we've got no way to kind of connect the names with the dates. So that's a little project. And then on Friday, October 16th, the Esquitoc, which is the local historical society, is going to have a talk with questions and answers about what it was like to grow up in Nassau during World War II. Nassau on the home front. Nice. Which ought to be very interesting. Bob Van Alstyne, I don't know, some of you might know Bob Van Alstyne. Yep. Wade Stockman and Ray Lempka. They're going to be our speakers. Then on the next day, Saturday the 17th, the Town Historic Preservation Committee is going to have their local history day up at the VFW. And then the next day, weather permitting, down at the cemetery, I'm going to lead a first ever cemetery tour. Wow.
Do you know where Esquitoc, the name Esquitoc comes from?
That was Indian down here.
Oh, that one.
Somebody's got to go. I have to get out.
Yeah, we need to. We have an exit?
Yeah, I need to run back to the Methodist Church and get my car.
Can somebody help her get over?
Boy, you're excellent. Thank you very much. That was great.
Go back to the church. You don't have to abandon ship.
Good job.
Yeah. Well, 1929, December 29 is when it went out.
I didn't know we were done.
He was in a Boy Scout.
I didn't mean
Camp Hawley down in Kinderhook.
Stop any.
On the back side where they had all the pine trees, he helped fill in a lot of those pine trees.
As soon as the trolley, actually prior to the trolley going out, they already had bus service.
Yeah.
And the house that was the doppelganger of ours burned down. That's exactly our house. That was probably what that was.
You're a little late for the parade.
That's what it looked like originally. But our house, the kitchen, the summer kitchen, the room, this one right there. But the main part of the house was July 5.
What grandfather and great Bill and his grandfather.
County Route 7.
Oh, I know. They tore that all
What house did Methodist buy?
The second one on the left.
That was the meat market.
That's
What house did Methodist buy?
I remember that was done it when 3 times.
What house did Methodist buy?
I really did a nice job of working from many days.
First time we had no money.
Road there, up beyond that. And then, of course, done leaving.
Bottles of butter, too. That was the thing.
A lot of intermarrying, yes.
What house did Methodist buy?
Hey, yeah, when you really boil it down, there's a lot of
The one that burned down, that big old
on the corner?
colonial on the corner up there.
When was that?
And a couple of years ago. And then they saved the little one. When we first got there, and he redid that. What you say?
Across the bridge?
On the bridge.
There might be a relative.
Down.
He's got apartments to rent there. He has apartments.
I'm sure we got told that too. And I also got told, do you play cards? If you don't play cards, forget about moving there. Like Betty Cooper, like they all play bridge in the afternoon.
Somebody burned it down. That big old
Dr. Brower had all his Jewish friends would come and they played Canasta. There was only one Gentile that was invited. My grandma's church was one of it. He'd come home with a big tree line there, dividing line. That's something that's funny. He was proud of himself that they would win money from it. Louis Ashton, Doc Brower, a whole bunch. Right across the street from
There is a playroom, yeah.
Now don't forget to buy his book at the library and learn all. We can read all of the stuff he taught us.
I already got a copy.
So clearly the post office wasn't in the fairgrounds. Where was it? Where the original post office?
Well, I
We bought a bale from Agway, and my husband asked for straw. We ended up with hay.
Hi, Sam. That's the magnolia tree. You're looking straight at it. The one that looks as though she has a belt around the waist. And then next to it is a trumpet vine, and underneath that trumpet vine is a shed, a big shed. Isn't that amazing?